Hello, Fever fans. Welcome back to the Pacers Fever Show. I'm your host, Logan, and tonight we are discussing the huge win by the Indiana Fever in Minnesota at the Target Center. They take down the Minnesota Lynx, the best team in the WNBA, reigning Commissioner's Cup champions in the Minnesota Lynx, and the Indiana Fever are now the champions of the Commissioner's Cup. They will take back some hardware to Indianapolis. The victory celebration has begun. The girls are inside the locker room going live, champagne everywhere, having a lot of fun. Well wishes out to Red Panda, who is the halftime entertainer. If you've seen her before, she's the one that does incredible balancing acts and has been all over the WNBA, NBA. I think she's even done some NFL in different sporting events. I'm sure you've seen her. She does a tremendous job, but she actually got hurt tonight, fell off an 8-foot tricycle, I think is what happened, and fell to the ground. Luckily, it looks like it's just a wrist issue and an arm issue. It doesn't look like it's too severe. So we're wishing Red Panda well, and Caitlin Clark and them did, because she was the halftime entertainment tonight in the game. And the Fever were the entertainment on the floor in Minnesota as the Lynx had their worst game of 2025 and really have not struggled quite like they did tonight in a very long time. We're going to get into all of that. It was a defensive masterclass. The Fever put the clamps on the Lynx, handing them their first loss of the season at home. The Fever hoisted that trophy on Minnesota's home floor, capping off a thrilling victory and showcased their resilience and championship pedigree. Now, with that hardware in hand, the Fever are looking to build on that momentum as they shift focus back to the regular season. Thursday night's matchup against the Las Vegas Aces will be another true test of their championship mettle, as the Vegas Aces are projected to be one of the better teams in the WNBA as the season continues. In today's show, we'll be breaking down that incredible win over the Lynx and give you a preview of what's in store as the Fever face off against the Vegas Aces on Thursday evening. We'll talk about all the key matchups and everything that's going into that game. Let's dive into it. This is the Pacers Fever Show. You can find us over on YouTube if you are on the audio version of the podcast. If you're on the video side of things, you can find us anywhere that you find your podcast. We are available on the audio side of things as well. However you like to listen or watch, we are happy that you are here. We're happy to be talking about a championship coming back to Indianapolis. I know that can be a word that is very triggering around the Indianapolis area right now because of how close the Indiana Pacers came to a championship title. Tyrese Halliburton congratulating the Indiana Fever tonight through Twitter. So that was good to see Ty very uplifted and very in tune to this Fever championship win over the Minnesota Lynx. So let's talk about the game. We're going to get into all the things that happened that went right, what went wrong. Not much really went wrong as far as this game is concerned, especially for the Indiana Fever. Maybe some things that went wrong for the Lynx, what to take away from this game, what it can mean for momentum heading into the regular season and not having the Commissioner's Cup in putting it in the rear view and moving forward and trying to now increase your stock, I guess you could say, in the WNBA standings, as the Fever have been very inconsistent this season, a lot due to injury to Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham, the issues with DeWanna Bonner. So we're going to talk about all those things today during this episode because it's worth mentioning, as the Fever have done something they haven't done since 2012, I believe. And we'll get into everything that we need to talk about as far as the circumstances around the Fever, what it means going forward for this team, and do we think that this team could be a title contender as the year goes on. So getting into it, Caitlin Clark out with an injury, groin, missed the third straight game on Tuesday night. Again, this was the Commissioner's Cup Championship. Those new to the podcast or maybe new to the league or first catching this, you don't know what the Commissioner's Cup Championship is. It's a tournament. It's an in-season tournament, and you play. They do divide into two different conferences, the teams, and they play 5 games for the Eastern Conference, 6 games for the West because they have more teams on the West side of things. There's 6 teams in the East, 7 teams in the West. You play each team in your conference once, and then the best record, they keep standings, the best record out of those 5 or 6 games moves on to a title game. The team out of the West, obviously the Minnesota Lynx. The team out of the East was the Indiana Fever. Fever had a little bit of help there towards the end and scoot past the Atlanta Dream to get into this title game. But we are here on July 1st talking about the Indiana Fever collecting some hardware, $500,000 in the prize pool, and Coinbase is going to give an extra $120,000 in cryptocurrency to the prize pool as well to sweeten the pot. And the Fever are headed home. Big celebration on the court tonight after the game. So many things went well for the Indiana Fever, and you're starting to see this team really form an identity. And I think that's something that when we talk about WNBA, when we talk about NBA, when we talk about NFL, MLB, softball, whatever it might be, when you're talking about great teams, right? You have to think about what is that team trying to do? What is their strength? What are they trying to impose upon their opponents? And what makes them really tick? What is something that they can say, you know what, this is our identity. It's strength, it's speed, it's intensity, it's physicality, it's IQ, whatever it might be. There's always something that you can profile each team by. So if you think about all the successful teams in sports history, sports franchise history, whatever it might be, Indiana Fever, Indiana Pacers, if you think about what are these teams, right? So for instance, I always use the Pacers as an example because they're across the street. Not literally, they're really in the same building. But when you talk about the Pacers, the thing with them is pace, right? Speed, high efficient shooting, offensive prowess, and they've gotten better as a defensive team. If I had to profile this Fever team in 2025, I think the only thing you could really say is that this team wants to play fast. That's really all that was happening in the first 16 games. And as we move into the 17th game against the Aces on Thursday, you're already a third through the season, and you're trying to figure out what is this team? What are their strengths? And you want your team to play to their strengths, and you want teams to grow by learning what their weaknesses are and how they can. Oftentimes, it's shoring those weaknesses up, not necessarily making everything a strength, because obviously that's very difficult to do in any professional sports league. And in this league, as it currently exists, what can the Fever do to make themselves different or competitive against the top teams in the Western side of things, like if you're talking about Commissioner's Cup, Eastern side of things, or if you're just talking about the WNBA overall, right? So as we start to get the news that we're expanding the WNBA, and we are expanding. So actually, you know what? Let me pull up that news because WNBA, I should have let off with this. They announced expansion yesterday, 2 days ago, yesterday. So I'm sorry, I couldn't remember if it was Monday. Obviously, it was probably Monday because that's when everybody's working. But Monday at 10 a.m., WNBA press release, they announced that they're going to expand to 18 teams with 3 new teams coming to the WNBA. The last expansion team, obviously, was the team that joined this year to make it 15 existing teams. And that is going to be, that was Golden State. But the 3 new teams that are coming outside of the 2 teams that will join in 26 and, back it up. There's 2 teams coming there's 13 teams currently in the league. There's 2 teams that are coming that have not hit the court yet, but will hit the court next season. And that is Toronto and Portland. So their teams will tip off in 2026. The Cleveland team will begin play in 2028, followed by Detroit in 2029 and Philadelphia in 2030. A lot of people on X responded to my discussion about the expansion, and there was a lot of discussion about expansion in WNBA and what that all meant. And so many people were talking about the watering down of talent and possibly watering down the product on the court. I don't believe that's the case. I think that we have a lot of women that, they leave college and could play professionally, but because we are limited to the amount of teams, I'm not sure we quite understand just how deep the pool is of talented women that can play professional basketball. You look across the nation and even across the globe, you have women that the international game is going to start to grow. You've got to start somewhere. And I think that we've done a really nice job with Eurobasket, with American basketball. I feel with all of these teams playing internationally, with how big the NBA has gotten and how big the owners have gotten and the players like Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers and Nafisa Collier, all these stars are really starting to get a market elsewhere. I think you have a lot of young women and girls, even men and boys overseas that are really starting to tune into this league as well. You're seeing these broadcasted to different audiences. These are becoming national games. The FIFA have a ton of national games. And so the audience is growing at a tremendous rate. And I think the WNBA in past years has struggled with how quickly they should grow and where they should go to and what markets exist. But I think as time has gone on and as you have seen different cities get behind women's sports, I think you can identify markets that these teams will do well in. I know, for instance, out there in Portland, the Portland Thorns are the NWSL team, and they get a great crowd out there. So I think Oregon makes perfect sense. Toronto, Canada is very progressive, and women's sports is massive in Canada. I think that you have a very good fan base there as well. And then in the bigger cities, you're going to have a lot of young people, a lot of young families who are going to want to look for things to do, especially in cities like Cleveland, in Detroit, and in Philly. I mean, in the summer, you've got baseball, so you're not really competing with too many sports out there, maybe some soccer. But what a great opportunity to go catch some ball games and in these cities that are very big cities. I mean, Philly, Detroit, Cleveland, those are much bigger cities. And they'll say, well, they're mid-market in Cleveland and Detroit. But I mean, as far as the WNBA audience, I think that you're going. I mean, let's face the facts, right? Anywhere Caitlin Clark goes, they're filling out those NBA stadiums, and more so than any of the other professional teams that play in that city. So it is a great time, I think, to capitalize on the popularity of the sport. This is very similar to the effects that, I mean, and the NBA had already been established and had a nice following, but I'm not sure we've ever seen anybody ever in the history of sports that has meant more to the sport than Caitlin Clark does. And whether you're a fan or not, I know that a lot of people are showing up to root against her and root for their teams and their cities, and that's respectable, right? I mean, that's as long as it doesn't cross a line. That's what sports are all about, and it does. It has that same kind of feel that when LeBron would go places or Steph Curry goes places. That's the kind of magnitude that Caitlin Clark has on the WNBA. So they are now capitalizing on that. There will be at that point 18 teams. I mean, this is a major expansion, and by 2030, in 5 years, we will have 18 teams in the WNBA, which will mean resources will be better, the money will be better, there will be more lucrative TV contracts, there will be more marketing opportunities, there will be more cities involved, there will be bigger all-star games. I think at that point you will start to see them split the conferences, and then when you have 18 teams, that's when you start to get into a much better playoff system, I believe, than what the WNBA currently has. And that's no fault of theirs. That's just they're trying to grow the league. They only have 13 teams. So an 8-team playoff makes sense. But it's, again, I think that there's a lot to say about having a more competitive playoff system. And I think the way that you do that and the way that you're going to be able to accomplish that is when you have more teams. So I'm really excited about just the growth, and we will cover the expansion teams as they come along, as far as just talking about expansion drafts. And that's always a fun thing that I like to cover in other sports. So I can't wait to do it here. I can't wait to see what those teams look like next year in Toronto and Portland. I think those are two very great markets, and I think that that will kick off this really big expansion very nicely. And you already had Golden State, who's been a huge success. Probably one of the most successful teams that's come to the WNBA, if we're going to be honest. I mean, they are filling up that arena every night. NBA players bought in, NFL players going to see them play, a ton of people just traveling to see Golden State play in that arena. And it's been very impressive. They call it Valhalla, I think is what they call it, which is pretty cool. But an unbelievable demand, and the WNBA is capitalizing on it. And as they should, because we are going to, the more teams that we have, I truly do believe the more talent we will see, the more players that rise to the occasion and become stars, because there are more women allowed into the league, as there will be more women that are going to be needed to be drafted and put on rosters. I think that there is an abundance of players outside of the WNBA that could provide quite an impact. I mean, look at Ari McDonald, who was sitting around as a free agent, right? And the Fever might have found somebody that's going to be instrumental in their playoff run. I mean, I could see this team becoming a powerhouse because of Ari McDonald being off the bench and providing that spark. But with more expansion, you're going to find more players like that. You're going to turn over more stones to find more players. And that's ultimately why I think I get the opinions of watering it down if you expand too quick, but I also understand the fact that it's 18 teams. There are tons of women's basketball teams across the nation. I mean, look at the NCAA. There's really good players, college players, and then your networks start to get bigger. You start to have more scouting resources, developmental resources. So I think that hand in hand with the growth of basketball internationally, I think you're going to see the NBA become and the WNBA become premier leagues, not just in the United States, but across the globe, because basketball, it seems to be the sport that has transcended all countries, I guess you could say, sports lore. I mean, they've, soccer's always been seen as the most popular sport across the globe, but it's not necessarily, it's like the fifth most popular here in the United States. I think basketball is one and two in a lot of countries across the globe. It's such a universal game, and it travels well. So I think that you're really going to see a lot of growth here in the WNBA, and that's really exciting. And I think paired up with the NBA, I think we could really make a difference with a lot of these owners. So let's keep growing. It's really exciting. Basketball continues to be the universal language, it seems. Back to the game. This was a game when they announced that Caitlin Clark was out. My initial thought was that there was no way that the Fever could contend or even come close to what the Lynx were going to be able to do. Mind you, the Minnesota Lynx are currently, as it stands in the WNBA, they are the number 1 seed. They are 14-2. They had not lost a home game all season. They are 8-0 in the regular season. Their point differential was a plus 11.2. None of this will, I mean, the Fever game won't count. It won't show up in the record sheet. It won't show up in the standings. So it won't give the Lynx their 8-1 record at home. It still shows that the Lynx are 8-0. It's because that's the regular season. But the Fever hand them their first loss in this 2025 calendar year. And that is very impressive. And the way that they did it, I think, was even more impressive. And I think that's what's got a lot of people talking today. I mean, there's the talk of the town has been, unfortunately, Miles Turner. But when last night's game happened, I think it was a nice reprieve from everything that's been going on in Pacers land. And It did. There were moments where I was just like, "Man, this feels good. This feels good. This feels right. This feels like there's some joy back in the city of Indianapolis," because it's been a pretty gloomy couple of, well, not even a couple. It's been a week since Tyrese Halliburton, or like a week and a half since Tyrese Halliburton tore his Achilles. And here we are Tuesday night celebrating an Indiana Fever win that I think could change the way that this team starts to play, and could be a point where we look back at the end of the season or in the postseason and say, where did things turn around? And I think that a win like this, without your best player, without one of the best players in the league, an all-star, the captain of the all-star team, you beat a very talented monster of a team in the Minnesota Lynx. And you did it in a way that I think probably was your biggest question coming into the game, honestly. I think that we've talked about this, almost talked this to death, this point of how good can the Fever be defensively. Sometimes they're just not good enough on the defensive side of the basketball. I don't think they play with enough intensity at times. I think that a lot of their late game struggles to be able to close teams out, a lot of that's just been mental fortitude and the ability to have a short term memory. And when you're young, when you're growing in this league, I think it's hard to instill some of these values in these players because it's something you have to acquire through experience. And there has been a lot of experiences this season. And I know that Caitlin Clark being hurt for almost half the games that they've played now does not help. But you wanted to see players like Aaliyah Boston. I mean, even like Lexi Hull, Kelsey Mitchell, who's been around longer. You wanted to see them step into these roles and close out games, and it just was not happening. And I was worried coming into this Minnesota game because I did feel like this is a championship caliber team. I was afraid that the moment would just be too large for the Indiana Fever, especially without Caitlin Clark. I mean, that offense at times can look a shell of itself without Caitlin as they still try to navigate what that looks like. And I wouldn't say that their offense was necessarily like the greatest thing tonight. I thought it was good, but I thought there were moments where they really could have been better, including that first quarter. They get out to a slow start, and you see how good defensively this Minnesota team is. And we talked about that in the preview, that they are the best defensive team in the WNBA. So you knew coming in that points were going to be a luxury. And I thought that barring that first quarter, the offense really started to settle into a groove. And while you only score 74 points, you got open looks. I thought that you started to operate really well. 20 plus quarters, third in the second, third, and fourth. Again, not crazy good, and that's understandable going on the road, right? The road team doesn't typically shoot as well, but especially in an environment like this, like a playoff environment. And I felt that the Fever did a really nice job bouncing back after a pretty slow start where the game started 20-12 at the end of the first. Minnesota had the lead, and um, against this really great defensive team, I thought that this was that first quarter was kind of what I expected. A more mature, more experienced. They've been deep into the playoffs. Obviously, lost the final in overtime this last WNBA final against the Liberty. They won last year's Commissioner's Cup championship, so they've been here. They've done that. This is a team that has a wealth of experience versus a team that has very little when it comes to these really high leverage, intense games. And that first quarter kind of felt like, all right, well, the Fever are trying to get their footing, but it felt like, all right, well, Minnesota's a really great team, and they won that quarter by 8. and you can't let them get out ahead by that much because then they'll just put you away. And that wasn't the case. And it wasn't really necessarily anything the Fever were doing offensively. It was on the end where they still have a lot of growth, I felt, and I thought this was the best performance that they've had defensively all season. And it looked like a completely different team that came out in the second quarter. I thought their intensity, their ability to get into the passing lanes, cutting off transition, Natasha Howard, Lexi Hull, anybody that got to guard Nafisa Collier at points, I thought did a tremendous job against a player that's probably going to win MVP. If I had to pick right now, she would win the MVP, and it wouldn't even really be that close. So again, you come into this game, and she's a defensive player of the year, reigning defensive player of the year, Nafisa Collier, and I felt after the first, it was like, uh, you better not let them get out too far, because if this gets to a double digit game, this could get ugly and get ugly quick. But and in the first quarter, Nafisa had 6. Um, I think they call I think it's pronounced Alana Smith, right? Yeah, Alana Smith. There's my pronunciation guy. Alana Smith. I was calling her Alana Smith, but is she Australian? Because she had, yep, Australian. 'Cause she did. She had the Aussie accent. It threw me when they were interviewing her. Uh, but Alana Smith, I thought, was good early as well. Another person that we highlighted as being a challenge just because she has the ability to score. And this Lynx team, I mean, they've got players that can score up and down this roster. They've got tremendous depth, and that's something that I thought the Fever would really struggle with. Uh, but again, like I said, that first quarter, I mean, got great production from Courtney Williams, from Alana Smith, from Nafisa Collier. They seem to be in a good spot. Their key contributors were scoring points. I felt that they were rebounding the basketball well. I I then look at the way that the Fever were playing. Ari McDonald started well, Kelsey Mitchell as well, but Flash and Aaliyah Boston weren't necessarily great to start the game. I will say Natasha Howard, and this is something I talked about if you went back to the preview that we did in the last episode for this game. I said that the Fever would have an advantage being able to rebound the basketball. And early on, Aaliyah Boston and Natasha Howard rebounded the basketball very well. Flash had 5 rebounds in the first quarter. Aaliyah had 3. And early in this game, it wasn't necessarily the prettiest of basketball being played. I thought that you look at shooting percentages, not great in that first quarter, and ultimately, I felt that the Fever were kind of fortunate to be down 8 against a really good team. I had a hard time trying to figure out, all right, where are they going to where are the Fever going to get steady enough points, because they only shot at 27% from the field in the first. Where are the Fever going to get points enough to keep up with Minnesota? Because Minnesota's not going to let you score a lot of points, and they're going to score quite a bit because they've got the MVP in my mind. So what were the Fever going to be able to do to counteract that? And um, for a Minnesota team that's ranks second in scoring, I was like, this isn't really a great mix. 12 points is kind of alarming. But then all of a sudden, the second quarter, the Lynx, I think, go 8+ minutes without a basket. And the Fever stomp in the Lynx in the second quarter and flip the game back on its head. And Minnesota scores 7 points in the second quarter. They started to get a little bit back towards the end of the half, so it gave them a little bit of momentum heading into halftime. But the Fever win that quarter 20-7. And if you go back and look, I watched some of the highlights again tonight, and their defense, they were jumping passing lanes, fighting through picks, dropping off the screens where they didn't have shooters coming off those picks. And then if you look at Natasha Howard, she was body to body with Nafisa Collier. And if you look at Nafisa Collier, a lot of her shot chart is her going to the left of the paint, and she likes to do that. Somebody explained it pretty well. It's kind of like a Dirk Nowitzki uh, fade jump shot that she likes to throw up there. And I felt like Flash was constantly in her grill and didn't let her breathe, didn't let her get to her spots, made it very difficult. And I think something that Natasha Howard offers that maybe some of the other teams don't really offer to put on Nafisa Collier, who is one of their forwards. Not a she's a stronger body. She's 6'1", so she's not tremendously tall. Natasha Howard, who is 6'3", a little more slender than Nafisa Collier, but those 2 inches of length and then how long Natasha Howard's arms are, I feel really, really challenged Nafisa Collier, who is the best scoring player in the WNBA, averaging 24.4 points per game. And in tonight's game against the Fever, the defensive pressure that Natasha put on Nafisa Collier gave her all sorts of headaches. She was 6 of 18 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3. She was a minus 12. She only had 12 points. She had 9 boards. That's pedestrian at best for a player that is running away with an early MVP nod and the best player in the WNBA right now. And Natasha Howard made her look like a role player tonight. And she truly was the difference in tonight's game. I feel that the defense that Natasha played, plus the offensive production, which is why Natasha Howard, deservedly so, gets the MVP at the end of this game. I thought that she showed that veteran leadership that you need to kind of steady the ship, get the offense rolling. She was a plus 17, 12 rebounds. She had 3 offensive rebounds, 16 points. She did have 6 turnovers, so she didn't handle the ball as well. I mean, that's a lot of turnovers, especially for Natasha Howard. But relying upon her offense to get it going, she had 4 assists, 2 steals. Aaliyah Boston, I mean, the two of them combined for 28 points, 23 rebounds, 8 offensive rebounds together, and shot 9 of 25 from the field combined, 10 of 10 from the free throw line. They were a plus 32 together. And we talked about it. We said that their size, because Minnesota does not have a typical big, they do not run a big lineup. That our two bigs would have an advantage, and quite the advantage. And that really did come into play tonight. The Fever out rebound the Minnesota Lynx 40-30 total over the game, 20 assists to 13 for the Minnesota Lynx. And I think looking at my notes, I think it said that the 13 assists tonight by the Lynx were the least amount of team assists that the Lynx have had all season. And the last time, and here's another fun one. The last time Minnesota had gone at least 8 consecutive minutes in a game without scoring was August of 2011, before the Lynx had won the first of their 4 WNBA championships, which came later that season. So maybe it's a good thing that maybe it's a trend. Maybe because they didn't score in 8 consecutive minutes, they'll win the WNBA championship this year. But Howard, I think we forget how great she was or is defensively, was the WNBA's Defensive Player of the Year in 2019 when she was with the Seattle Storm. But I think that she was very deserving of that MVP trophy tonight because she changed the game. She altered everything that Minnesota wanted to do and everything that their engine wanted to do to make that thing go. And so I thought that that was a big difference tonight. So looking at how we got here, right? It's very impressive. I mean, Tawana Bonner is with you all the way up till about this championship game, and somebody that had championship pedigree, somebody that stepped into a role that we thought, veteran leadership. She was going to be able to stable the ship when Caitlin was not necessarily at her best or not playing. So that's why you go out and get a player like Tawana Bonner. But she, in the midst of all of this run through the Commissioner's Cup final, or the run through the Commissioner's Cup tournament, was basically when it all started. I mean, I think that first game is when Caitlin goes down hurt and Tawana Bonner is like back and forth between starting and not starting. And so it starts there. It gets real bumpy in the middle. Tawana Bonner goes out for personal reasons. Stephanie White's had to miss because of some personal reasons that I think is pretty tied in with her family. So a very emotional time for Stephanie White. You've got Caitlin Clark not completely healthy. Sophie Cunningham gets hurt. Ari McDonald, you signed to a hardship contract. She then leaves. You have to wait 10 days to bring her back. And she was one of the best players, if not the best player in that stretch when Caitlin was missing. And then when she gets back, Dantas has to leave. So you're back down. So this team has faced a ton of adversity early on in this season. And that was something that they asked Stephanie White about. And Stephanie was very transparent. And she said, you know what? We have a resilient group, here's the quote. They're tough mentally and physically. They pull for one another. I'm just really proud. We're going to continue to get better. Caitlin is a player who has a high usage rate, has the ball in her hands a lot. Learning to play without her, learning to how to make big plays in tough moments on both ends of the floor is important. I think it's a great point. She, I think, has the highest usage rate when she's out there. Caitlin Clark does, which honestly, you get it. But when something like that happens, it takes games, weeks, months, even years to try to figure out how to play without your star player. It's tough. It's very tough because those players are not relied upon as much. And then when Caitlin comes back, it probably won't be an easy transition back to having Caitlin back full time all the time. I think that there's a lot there that has to work itself out. And Caitlin's got to get better in certain areas. The team has to get better in certain areas when Caitlin's on the floor. But tonight really shows that this Fever team, and I think their game against there are two games against the Liberty that they've now played. They lost the first one, won the second one when Caitlin returns. Caitlin got hurt in the first one. You've seen them go up against really good teams and put up a really good fight, and now they've beat the two best teams, in my opinion, in the league. I mean, the Mercury are up there with them now, but with the Liberty and the Lynx, the Fever have now beaten them. And you could make the argument that the Fever should be 3-0 against the two top teams in the WNBA. So a very impressive win on the road against a Lynx team that was favored by 10.5 points. The Fever come in as huge underdogs, and a team that regularly beats opponents by 11 points or more struggle mightily against this Fever defense. And really, it was the fast-paced offense, the efficient shooting, getting better from three, taking more threes. That was, and getting out and scoring in transition. Like that was what was in discussion at the beginning of the season of like, what is this team going to be? And Stephanie White said, that's what we want to be. But we also know we have to make improvements on the defensive side of things because we can score as much as we want, but if you can't defend in this league, then other teams are going to beat you. And where have we heard that story before? I mean, you look at the Indiana Pacers. It's eerie how similar some of the things that these two franchises are going through because they're under that same ownership group. It's just eerie how similar they are in the way that they've progressed. And things obviously the makeup of their team thing they happen in different ways. I mean, the Pacers didn't fall into two back-to-back first overall picks with Boston and Clark, but I think that their journeys have been somewhat the same. And if you remember back, not this past season, but the season before when the Pacers won or got to the in-season tournament final, ended up losing that to the Lakers. The Pacers often pointed back to that was when this team knew that they and had confidence that they could compete with anybody in the league and they could win a championship, which is wild, right? Because they were young very young, and that was without Pascal Siakam. Fast forward all the way up, now they're in the NBA Finals. Now it seems, and after the year before where they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, it now seems that the Fever are kind of following that same blueprint, right? A team last year that was very young, that needed that veteran leadership to come in. You get Natasha Howard to come in. You get Sophie Cunningham, a great bench piece. They've built out this bench. They've got a spark plug like TJ McConnell and Ari McDonald. They have a really great defensive shooting three, kind of like Aaron Nesmith. It's Lexi Hull. It's weird how similar that these journeys have been, and I think it's a lot of fun. I think that Stephanie White's talked about Rick Carlisle. Rick Carlisle's talked about Stephanie White. They've learned a lot from one another, and Stephanie was the first to admit that she's gone to Rick and Jenny and talked about defensive things with them. And it seems like the practices between both franchises are pretty similar, and the culture that they are building, where they are resilient, they will fight, they will stand up for one another. They do not let others come in to try to impede on what they're trying to do as a team, as a process. And I think that togetherness, and you see it in the celebrations, just how much these players care for one another. The DeWanna Bonner situation is unfortunate, but you get rid of that, and that situation is better now. And I think will continue to get better as time goes on and things start to settle and Caitlin Clark returns, and then you start to infuse that into what this team is doing right now that's been pretty successful in her absence, with a secondary ball handler outside of Kelsey Mitchell, where Kelsey's not trying to do everything when Caitlin's out. Now you've got Ari McDonald, you've got Sydney Colson playing really good basketball. Dantas has played really well, and then she goes and plays well with her national team, and she'll be back. Aaliyah Boston having some historic nights of her own. Kelsey Mitchell's on a hell of a streak. So, and Lexi Hull might be in the argument for best, most improved player in the WNBA. So I think everything's going to start to come together for this team. I feel like this is a big time turning point. I feel like mentioning that in-season tournament for the Pacers is important because I think this is the same kind of thing, except the Fever had a better outcome in their in-season tournament, winning this game. I just feel like this can give you so much momentum going forward. You now have five games back at Gainbridge Fieldhouse against good opponents, good tests, teams. I think all four of them I think four of the five teams they lost games to. So this is a good test to get back on the right track with all these teams that you've lost to. It is quite a swing, I think, that the Fever can put out in these next 5 games. This is, I would say, this is the turning point of the season. How they handle this next 5 will be very important to what their aspirations are in the postseason, right? And they can struggle through this and still bounce back. But I think that this is a perfect test for what this team really wants to be this year. And I know Caitlin Clark's health dependent, right, on how this goes and what it looks like in the future. But I think like you're at 8-8, you're at 500. Now would be a good time to get 3 or 4 games up over 500. And I think they've got a good shot of doing that against some of these teams. And they're good teams. But I think if you want to be the best, you've got to beat some of the best, and some of the best are coming to town. So we'll see what happens on Thursday night, and we'll preview that a little bit as we get through this game. But I just wanted to do some closing thoughts on um, what this team has done over the last, you know, day or two, where you get bad news with Caitlin Clark, and it doesn't seem like she's coming back like right away. So it does feel like there's still some games that will be played that Caitlin is still not out there for, but I think that she really is going to make a huge impact when she comes back, and with a team that is going to be playing their best basketball that they've been playing all season because of tonight's game and tonight's win against Minnesota. I think you got to carry over that same defensive intensity. I think you've got to carry over this confidence that you can play and beat anyone in this league. And that is something that I think goes so unnoticed at times, that like wins like these, of how monumental they can be. And I want to remember this win because I feel like tonight's Commissioner Cup championship, and hoisting that trophy and getting that feeling, and putting those hats on, putting those shirts on, getting to celebrate in the locker room. Like I feel like that is a feeling that you want more of, and you want, not that the Commissioner Cup championship is, should I put it down in any way, or it's not as important or whatever, but the WNBA championships what they want, right? It's really what they want. They want the parade. They want to celebrate with the city, and this city really wants to celebrate with them. It's been a tough go, and I think the players understand that. I think they understand what's happened on the other side of things. So they've seen what loss looks like. They've seen what that can, but I think it fuels them just the same. And I'm excited to see what the Fever do going forward. And speaking of going forward, getting into the next game against the Vegas Aces, which will be Thursday night. And you can see that on the bottom there, 7 p.m. Eastern time on Amazon Prime. That is, again, July 3rd. That is a Thursday. So they will be on Prime. They were talking about Caitlin Clark. They, meaning Stephanie White, talked about Caitlin Clark, said she's making progress. Top of the mind is long term, making sure we don't have any setbacks. Making progress and feeling good are two different things, and we want to make sure that she feels good, that she's confident. That's the priority right now, and that is very important. Obviously, you don't want your star player getting hurt and missing long stretches of the season, and the more games that she can sit out to get right and doesn't have to miss as many games later on down the road, that's what you want. And that's what the Fever are doing. They're being very cautious with their franchise player, and I totally understand that. They head in Thursday to play the Las Vegas Aces. Asia Wilson, last time out against the Fever in Vegas when the Fever went out on that West Coast trip, they ended up winning just the one game out there. They lost their last game against the Vegas Aces, in which Asia didn't really play well in the first half, first three quarters. I mean, really had a hard time, but really stepped on the pedal and got things going, finished with 24. She was, I mean, seriously, she was not great to start this game. She and Caitlin Clark really struggled in early on. They combined for 2 of 15 midway through the second quarter, the both of them, Wilson and Clark. So 2-star, 2 elite, 2 MVP caliber players were almost non-existent for a while there. And then Asia starts to turn it on. She turns on that MVP type performance that she's had in the past, and got her the MVP last year. But despite cold shooting to start, the Aces win 89-81. And it started a stretch for the Fever. And again, they had a moment there where they could have stepped on the gas and closed out the Aces. It was tied, I think, at one point, 69-69 in the fourth quarter. The Aces outscore Indiana 9-2, go ahead and then never let them back into it. But that's when, I mean, the Fever had multiple leads in that game. I felt they could have put the emphasis on D'ing up and getting the necessary closeout that they needed to put Vegas away. But at the end of the day, Vegas just the better team. Asia Wilson, the best player on the court. and that's ultimately what solidifies that. Leah Boston scored 26 points in that game, including 18 in the first half. Clark, last year's Rookie of the Year, 19 points and 11 assists, but shot just 1 from 10 from the three-point line. I think from that at that point, she was 1 for 17 from deep over her last 2 games. I forget which was the game. I think it was the Connecticut Sun, maybe. That was the game before that. But it's been tough sledding ever since. I think the groin was really bothering her. Or did they go out to go? I think they went out to Golden State maybe first, but they had a hard time closing out Golden State in that game. And again in Vegas, same kind of thing. Weren't really able to kind of step on the pedal to put Vegas out, and Vegas ends up winning. It's been the common occurrence, and so it was nice to see them keep a lead, hang on to the lead, and close out Minnesota and really not let them back into the game at all. I think they got it down to 10, but it was really not much after that, maybe 7. But then right back, the Fever fought and punched out the Lynx. Kelsey Mitchell had 20 for Indiana. And like I said, it was a back and forth tight game, and Vegas ends up being more talented team. Players to watch: Asia Wilson, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, and Jewel Lloyd. I want to go back. Accidentally closed out what I was looking at because I was going to go back to the previous box score from when the Aces and Fever last played. Looking at the Vegas Aces, Asia Wilson, 24 points, Chelsea Gray, 18, Jackie Young, 19, Jewel Lloyd, 10 points. Aaliyah Nye had 11 points off the bench. She was excellent in that game. So they had 5 players in double figures. They have a really good offense as far as when it gets going, it is hitting you from all different directions, kind of like the Fever, very similar to them. And all honestly, as why they get wrapped up in the conversation of being one of the better teams in WNBA. They've got a lot of good scoring options. They've got some really great players, the ones that I just mentioned. But they've not really played up to their, I think, what they were expecting this season. They also sit at 8-8 at 500 heading into Gainbridge Fieldhouse for Thursday night's game, and they are 3-4 on the road. So not great on the road, and I think the Fever can take advantage there. Their offense has not been, I think, as high potent as I think they thought they were going to be, but they do. They don't defend it as well either. So it's been kind of a struggle for the Aces. Kind of the same story with Indiana, just not really any kind of consistency. They've got the best player in the WNBA, reigning best player in the WNBA at this point, and she's a big difference in what they do and how they perform. They're going to have to keep them off the glass. The Aces off the glass. I feel like that's the key to most of these games with the Fever is the rebounding battle, the possession battle, because oftentimes that's been their downfall. That's been why they've lost some of these games, is the Fever not being able to keep the other teams close enough in those spots. And I feel that if somebody came to me and said the Fever lost, why they lose, I could point to rebounding probably. I could point to points in the paint. I think transition points and then the 3-ball is going to be a big difference between these teams. And free throw shooting has been atrocious. The Fever are the worst free throw shooting team in the WNBA. And if you look at the last game, the Aces shot 19 of 21. 9 of 21 was really bad. 19 of 21 Vegas was from the free throw line. And the Fever only had 9 free throws. They were 7-9. So they get outscored by 12 on the charity stripe and get outshot by 12 in free throws. Rebounding, they actually did pretty well against Vegas. I thought pretty even, 33-31. So not too much of a difference there. The turnovers were a problem. Points conceded off turnovers, 28 off of turnovers, scored on the Fever on their 18 turnovers, and the Fever only scored 16 off of the 13 turnovers. So a huge discrepancy there, 12-point difference. And That really was the difference in the game. The free throw shooting, it looks like, and then the points off of turnovers were a big thing. Um, the Fever had a lead of 10, Aces had a lead of 9. Again, a seesaw type of battle, and I thought Indiana looked to be the better team in the first half. Vegas was easily the better team in the second half. So it was a tale of two halves, and ultimately, when you've got the best player in the league, you don't really want to hang around with them in a tight game late on their home floor. And that's ultimately what happens. And then 31-21 in that fourth quarter, Vegas outscores Indy by 11. And there was no defense that existed at all. There were no answers. There was nothing out there as far as the defensive prowess was concerned for the Fever in that fourth quarter. So that was the tale of the last game. Missing players, not really missing anybody in their rotation. Gustafsson, who is their one of their bench bigs, is estimated to return tomorrow. Don't know if that's necessarily the case. Haven't really updated there. And then Cheyenne Parker Tyus is out until August. So she is obviously not going to be featuring in anything. Also, I think a bench player. Like I said, players to watch. The four are listed: Asia Wilson, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, Jewel Lloyd. I mean, those are really good offensive players, and I feel Fever will have their hands full. You've got to defend 5 scorers because they'll throw in the bench pieces too. So a tough matchup, a pretty good offensive team when they get it going. But I think the defensive intensity, the way they played against the Lynx, I think that carries over, and we'll see how they match up against the Aces. I think a pretty good test coming off of that high that you have beating a Lynx team that many thought you had no business in beating. Keys of the game, close out anything, right? I think there's a moment where the Fever will have a pretty good lead in this one. Maybe it's late, and I think that, getting off that the the figurative hangover from their win against maybe literal too of against the Lynx. I think that they should bounce back pretty well, and I hope it's just not a letdown kind of game because they're coming off that high and just don't play as well. Possession battle, like I said, those turnovers, there were too many and way too many points given up off those turnovers. They were live ball, disastrous turnovers. Asia Wilson containment, I think they did a really nice job of keeping her pretty contained. I think they probably rely heavily on a lot of maybe Natasha Howard again, and throw some Aaliyah Boston at her every once in a while. But I think that Natasha's maybe better suited as far as her abilities to play up against Asia. Defensive intensity, like I said, I think if you can match even close to what you did against Minnesota, I think that you've got a pretty good shot in this game. Schedule coming up for the Indiana Fever. Again, like I mentioned, 5 home games in a row here. It starts on Thursday, July 3rd against the Las Vegas Aces at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Amazon Prime. Saturday, July 5th against the Sparks. We will see them again at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on NBA TV. Wednesday, July 9th, so a pretty good break there. The Golden State Valkyries will visit, and they play at noon. I don't know why. I continue to be really puzzled by why are they playing on a Wednesday afternoon at 12 noon on NBA TV. Is there something going on in Cambridge? Is there like a concert or something? I'm very confused as to why the game is so early. Friday, July 11th, they will host the Atlanta Dream, a very good team, a team that they've struggled with this season. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time at Cambridge on Ion. That game I feel like should be like on national TV. Like, that's a good game. Sunday, July 13th versus the Dallas Wings, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, ABC ESPN Plus at Cambridge. And that will end their 5-game homestand. They then go on the road Tuesday, July 15th against the Connecticut Sun in Connecticut at 8 p.m. on ESPN in the TD Garden. I believe that's in Boston. Wednesday, July 16th against the New York Liberty, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS Sports Network at the Barclays Center. And then they will remain there for basically a week, which is no, sorry, that's right. I don't want to, that was wrong. They play the All-Star game, so they come back to Indianapolis and then they go back out to New York in the next week, July 22nd. But yeah, the All-Star game, I believe they do All-Star festivities that Friday, so the 18th, 19th. The 19th is the All-Star game. Caitlin Clark was named captain. Aaliyah Boston will be there. WNBA All-Star. I want to say Kelsey Mitchell too. Sorry, I'm checking. I know that me talking is pretty. You need me to talk if I'm going to be on a podcast. And WNBA All-Star roster 2025. So they announced players yesterday. Caitlin Clark will be captain. She had the most fan votes, 1,293,526. Will be joined in the backcourt by rookie number 1 overall draft pick Paige Beckers, the Dallas Wings, Alicia Gray, Sabrina Ionescu, Nafisa Collier, Ogumike, I think that's how you say her last name. Brianna Stewart, Asia Wilson, Leah Boston, Satu Sabali. And then voting will begin for the other 12 All-Star Game reserves. And that resumes on July 6th at noon is when you can start to, or no, that's when it will be announced. So voting has already resumed. So you can vote now for the reserves. Okay. We will update you on Sunday because I'm going to do an episode on Sunday when I get back from all the holiday festivities to record because we're not record over the holidays. We'll record Sunday and we will announce the All-Star because I think it will be announced by then. We'll all announce the All-Star outcome. If not, we'll do an episode the following week where we'll do that. But like I said, we're going to miss. So they play Thursday, July 3rd. I'm not going to record after that game, and I'm not going to record after that July 5th game against the Sparks. I'll be recording an episode on Sunday, July 6th. So it'll probably be up on July 6th or July 7th on that Monday when you'll get the next episode of this show because of the holiday. And it is a good time to take a break. We've been going nonstop with all the Pacer news that's been happening and how far they went into the NBA playoffs, and then the Indiana Fever and how fast they've been going. And it's been a lot. So it'll be good to get a break. I think everybody will enjoy the break. I know a lot of people don't really listen to podcasts, especially on July 4th weekend, and especially when it's on a Friday this year. So we will be taking a break. We will be doing an episode on Sunday again to recap what happened in the Vegas and Los Angeles game. And we'll see where the Fever sit with that. We are going to be over on X. I might be tweeting during some of the games because I'll watch them, but we're not going to do an actual recording for a bit here. And we will catch up with you all either Sunday or Monday. I really appreciate the support so far. It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed covering the Fever this season. And now that the Pacers are really winding down into their, middle of the summer slumber, it should be pretty quiet on their front. So we can do a lot more episodes. We're going to do some episodes of them, but we're going to do a lot of episodes here with the Fever, recapping all the games and talking about all of them, previewing them, and getting into some discussions about All-Star weekend and all sorts of things. So we will be, again, back next week. We really appreciate all of the support. Like I said, you can find us over at the Pacer Fever Show on YouTube. Subscribe, like, comment. What do you think about this Commissioner Cup title? Where do you rank that? Do you think this is a turning point? Do you feel like this is a point where the Fever can really start to take off? What games are you looking forward to over the next couple of weeks that I read off? Who are you hoping makes the All-Star games as reserves? I think Kelsey Mitchell probably makes it as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Could they do like has Natasha Howard played well enough to maybe make an All-Star game? I don't know. But we will see how heavy it is because it is in Indianapolis. Caitlin will be the center of attention there, and Aaliyah Boston and anybody else that will be on that. It's just going to be a fun weekend in Indianapolis. She will be the mayor. Maybe we see some Pacers out there enjoying that as well. It'll be quite the celebration. I know the Colts, I think, start preseason camp soon. So it is still a busy time, even though the summer is one of those slower times in sports. You've got tons of stuff happening with All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis with the Fever and how exciting the Fever have been It's going to be a fun summer. I look forward to covering it all. Again, Pacers Fever Show over on all the socials, anywhere you find your podcast, and on YouTube. We will see you next time when we will be recapping the Vegas Aces game and the Los Angeles Sparks game. So until next time,